The title of this talk is a reference to a now famous meme commonly referred to as "graphic design is my passion." Here's the original. According to knowyourmeme.com, this image originated in 2014 on microblogging website Tumblr. User Young Tara posted this graphic with no further context, but it was pretty popular. It racked up hundreds of thousands of notes. From there, it was used to mock various design choices, oftentimes those made by the Tumblr staff to the website itself, but all kinds of different design choices. The design of the meme is minimal, but the point is clear. You can almost hear the sarcasm in your head based on the visual delivery alone. Graphic design is my passion. There are several graphic design crimes on display. The white background of the clip art, the random color choices, the questionably legible type, and the JPEG artifacting, not to mention the use of papyrus, are all deliberate, meant to evoke a certain kind of naive, bad-on-accident graphic design. There are dozens of examples of this meme being reinterpreted, with some commonalities you can see. They all love a so bad it's good type choice, a gradient, clip art, etc. There's a whole blog devoted to tracking these variations, and while each and every one of them does tickle me, the one thing in particular about the spread of this meme piqued my interest. And that's how individual elements have taken on a life of their own. With your newfound knowledge of this meme, take a look at these edits of album covers. Contextualized by the original meme, these are critiques of the design, delivered in a way that makes anyone who knows the meme hear it in their heads. And you don't need to see the whole meme to recognize the point being made here. These are badly designed, in the person's opinion that created them. And that's the power of mimetic spread. Like, a whole section of my generation will always associate these elements. This clip art frog, that red papyrus, with sarcasm, regardless of context. Not even a year later, someone reinvented graphic design as my passion and created this. Graphic design is my burden. While graphic design is my passion sarcastically sends up bad designers, graphic design is my burden is its complement, expressing the feeling of tragically knowing enough about graphic design to notice bad design. This iteration uses a different frog, a Pepe, instead of the original frog clip art, and the emotion reflects the despair of the statement. It's evocative, like who among us hasn't felt this way? And simply typing the words out wouldn't have had this effect either. The whole image builds new meaning, one that includes the original meme as well. I'll digress for just a second here to show one variation of this meme in particular that I really enjoy. Some of you may remember the public outcry at the design of CGI Sonic the Hedgehog early this year. Well, one reaction took the following format. Character design is my burden. And from this you can infer not only how the poster feels about this Sonic, which was horrific, but in a more meta sense, you can see who they feel is to blame, like the designers. Much in the way that graphic design is my burden refers to graphic design as my passion, there's a complement to this that you can infer. A character design is my passion person responsible for the creation of this Sonic. There are levels of meaning associated with using this particular format, and the joke works without them, but so much context is added when you know. Type is a major part of most memes, and has been from the beginning. In the early days, when image macros like Icon has cheeseburger and Velociraptor were popular, the typeface was mostly chosen for readability. Most used Impact, a system font and condensed sans serif that by nature of its black outline was highly legible over any image, and anyone could use it. Image macros were easy to use, that's why they were popular. And now, with smartphones and free photo editing software and apps, it's easier than ever to make a meme, and meme makers get to be a little more creative. Many people much more knowledgeable than I are working on documenting and classifying memes. Know Your Meme, the site I mentioned earlier, does a really good job. The Library of Congress is actually archiving the site as part of its files. So today I'm going to focus in, and we're going to focus specifically on the purpose type serves in memes. I see three main categories. First, there's type as aesthetic, or just random. Secondly, there's type used as visual irony or sarcasm. And thirdly, and most interestingly, there's type as reference. So let's break these down. As a warning before we get into these, a lot of these are loud visually. I'm sorry, I'm not shouting at you about the autonomous zone, I promise. But tone is an important component to these. Like, just by making this a meme, it shows you how important it was to the original person. I tried to avoid the more blatantly political ones, of which there are many, But as a caveat, some of these are spicy. All views reflected are those of the meme maker. The first category is obviously the most fun. When I was pulling examples, it was the group I filled out the quickest. This is also probably a group you've seen, heading up articles about the so-called millennial sense of humor. I would argue that's more generally an internet sense of humor, and the millennials are the first generation to grow up online, but that's neither here nor there. The type is used as an aesthetic element in these, almost more the idea of a meme than a true meme. A reaction image is something you could call it, but it's hard to say what it would be reacting to. They lean so deeply into absurdism. References exist, but they're minimal or super insular, and look at the typographic variety. Sometimes I see a meme and my initial reaction is truly, how did they make this? Like this one. There's a definite aesthetic at play, but this is also very well designed. This is a great piece of graphic design. And conveniently, it overlaps with my second category, so there's the lead-in. The second category is broad but also simple. Memes where language and design are used ironically. There are some interesting trends in this category, like people like to use Microsoft Word art styles a lot. They're often the heavier memes. The visuals are like purposefully outdated or retro or tacky. There's a layer of intentional disconnect between what's being communicated visually and verbally. And in discussing this, I want to quote internet linguist Gretchen McCullough. She describes irony as a linguistic trust fall. Irony is complicated to convey through text because it's hard to communicate, period. It requires a level of unsaid, understood connection between those in the communication. And so, as she recognizes, it also creates space for sincerity. If you and I can have the same web of complex attitudes towards one thing, she posits, maybe we can share more straightforward attitudes towards others. If you and I, for example, both find this extremely absurd piece of graphic design relatable, then perhaps we share more serious opinions. And on the internet, things are high stakes. In using sarcasm online, meme makers aren't just being sarcastic, they're signaling their membership to a group that shares this sense of humor and this sense of aesthetic. This is a group that knows more about graphic design than any other before them, and how could they not? We live in a world where in any given day, someone using the internet will see more graphic design than previous generations could even dream of. Paired with increasingly dire circumstances in the world at large, like a rise in political extremism, a rise in diagnosed mental illness, and the climate crisis, to name just a few things, and it's no wonder that people have responded by creating memes about these things that provide some distance. As McCullough observes, irony makes room for sincerity. The sarcastic nature of the graphics provides plausible deniability and distance from the vulnerability expressed in the words. It's a feature, not a bug, that it's an in-group signifier to understand the memes. If someone doesn't get it, they don't deserve to know how you feel. The third group is the referential group. There are straightforward ones like these, mostly screenshots of shows. And the thing that separates the straightforward ones from the more complicated ones in this reference category is the level of meaning that ends up being established in the individual pieces of the screenshot. In rare occasions, that meaning is stored in the text in ways that can be recombined with others. And I know that sounds a little confusing, so I'm going to get into an example. And the trouble with this is that this is a relatively rare phenomenon. Like, I don't even see it in graphic design outside of like identity design, where, you know, the Google font means Google. You can see it in graphic design as my passion to a degree, where the individual elements can be used on their own, and red papyrus will never strike me the same way. But to be even more clear, I'm going to dissect another example that involves 3 different memes. Here's the image we'll be discussing. It's kind of ransom notey. 3 pieces jigsawed together to make something that's ultimately oppressively obtuse at the first look. But the meaning is clear to anyone familiar with the underlying memes, so let's get familiar with them. First, there's the base. This meme is called "Is This a Pigeon?" based on the original screenshot. It's from a relatively obscure 90s anime, and it's generally used to express sincere confusion or mock other people for making an obvious mistake. This meme was tweeted by Netflix early in the resurgence of its use, and it's been a popular base for reinterpretations ever since then. Next, there's the enslaved moisture meme. It belongs to a group called like surreal memes. The man on the left is Meme Man. He's seen in a lot of these, and here he introduces a humorous term for bottled water. The joke mostly lays in calling things enslaved X and recontextualizing them. There are a billion variations of this as well. Finally, there's this screenshot from American sketch show Tim and Eric. The episode with the shot originally aired in 2009, but the screenshot on its own became a meme in around 2018, where it gained traction being used as a reaction shot. A typical use of it would be in an environment like this. The screenshot preserves some of the original context of the video clip, like the feeling of a smarmy used car salesman. It's been remixed a million times to the point where the text itself is recognizable. So it helps that it's not any normal system font. There's no crossing this out and easily replacing it like you could with the papyrus. So meme makers innovated. They cut the text out and use it, or they put other people's faces over the original. And that brings us back to the original image that we were discussing. The free and the eyes from Free Real Estate, the yes and moisture from Enslaved Moisture, and the base, these combine to convey a surprisingly subtle and absurd message. Tap water might appear free, but isn't. The meaning is stitched together from this quilt of references. And as McCullough notes, memes are not the language of formality. Rather, they're approachable. Their stitched together nature encourages others to participate and try their own, adding images or words to create a brand new meaning. In a sense, it's democratized design. In another sense, it's fun to be bad at Photoshop together. I found this while putting this talk together, and it so perfectly encapsulates the community nature of memes. So let's recap. We've reviewed the history of a few memes in particular. We've looked at the purpose type serves in memes and how it takes on a meaning of its own. With all of this in mind, it's not even remotely up for debate that meme creators use text in thoughtful ways. As designers, we're taught to consider the words we typeset in our work. Meme makers do this fluently and intuitively, so there's no way to get around the fact that they have to be recognized as designers. One of the struggles in assembling this talk was the lack of attribution or other study of memes in internet culture. When Know Your Meme is able to source creators, in most cases they're anonymous usernames, and part of this is the nature of the medium. People use the internet anonymously, but some of it's because this information is not considered worth collecting. People rarely claim ownership of memes. In fact, in the broad cultural awareness, an interest in memes is seen as really niche. But this isn't an elective concern, particularly for designers. This is something that should affect how you do all of your work, especially if you do work online or in web. Memes are going to affect how an entire generation views your design. It is naive to consider familiarity with them as optional. Recently, the MoMA has made efforts to understand memes as art, which many have seen as progress, but I would argue that approach is not correct. Linguistic analysis sometimes uses these viewpoints of synchrony and diachrony, respectively, understanding things in the present or placing them in a broader historical context. Placing memes in the art category is synchronistic. They cannot exist outside of their broader context and the conversations they have with each other. And that context should include traditional design histories, too. In many cases, memes are acting in direct opposition of them. Our view of design as a whole, actually, needs to be diachronistic. We must recognize the field as it was and is taught, overwhelmingly male, white, and straight, and confront this to make room for new voices. McCullough quotes another internet linguist, David Crystal, who wrote in 2011, "The one thing internet language needs more than anything else is good descriptions. And language isn't the only thing on the internet needing description and study." While preparing this talk, I came across this tweet from the Typographic account. Type is in dire need of context, on and offline, of a diachronistic point of view that includes the entire history. And more than that, we need to expand our definitions of design to include people left behind by traditional design hegemonic structures. Not just those making memes, but women, people of color, and queer people who've been here all along with no recognition. As a member of the extremely online population, I see memes daily, and I have to admit, I don't go down this rabbit hole every time. Most of the time, I don't want to get into it. I summarize my thoughts in a snappy statement, packaged for laughs. Something that's not too vulnerable or too heavy. Something probably a lot like this. Type design is my burden. Thank you for letting me share it with you today.